Hello and welcome, everyone. So wonderful to see so many familiar names already in the chat. My name is Michelle Purdy. I'm a 2001 and 2003 graduate of Arts and Sciences. I am also currently an associate professor of education here at Washu. I'm coming to you live from my office in Siegel, and I serve as the director of the undergraduate program in educational studies, and I am chair of the Urban Scholars Alumni Advisory Council. On behalf of the WashU Black Alumni Council and the John B. Irvin Scholars Program, I'm so excited to welcome you to tonight's event featuring two outstanding women, Dr. Imani Cheers and Gabrielle Glore. Tonight's event is the first in a series sponsored by the BAC, celebrating the rich and diverse contributions of Black faculty and staff through their impact on alumni and friends of WashU. Before we begin, I would like to explain the format for tonight's session. You will only hear and see me and our presenters. The webinar will last about an hour and it will be live streamed. Following the conversation, we will have time for questions. We encourage you to participate by asking questions at any time by typing them in the Q&A box. During the Q&A session, we'll get to as many questions as we can. The webinar is being recorded as well, and we will share it on the Alumni Association YouTube channel, as well as on the BAC website following the event. Now it is my true pleasure to introduce and welcome my friend, Dr. Imani Cheers. Imani is an associate professor of digital storytelling, as well as the interim senior associate vice provost for undergraduate education at the George Washington University. She serves as co-chair of the WashU BAC DC Baltimore alumni chapter, and many of you will remember Imani's great contributions on campus back in the day to B-Side and Black Anthology. Welcome, Imani.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's such an honor to be here. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. For those who are joining us, it is just an absolute joy and pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to Miss Gabrielle Glore this evening and to share some of her work and her amazing experiences, in particular doing what I've always loved to do since I started at Washington University in St. Louis in 1998. Which is highlighting and focusing and loving on Black people, loving on Black stories, finding ways to highlight aspects of our community that are often overlooked, the love stories, the joys, some of the pains, but mostly the joys and the triumphs that we experience. So it is an honor this evening to introduce our community, for those who might not know her, hopefully many of you do, to Miss Gabrielle Glore. Gabrielle, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's such an honor. This is like so exciting. I mean, you, for those who might not be familiar with your absolutely illustrious career, I'm just going to go very briefly because we're going to dive into it. So I don't want to give too much away. But I know that at the moment you are retiring from which you're way too young to be retiring, but I do respect the energy to want to do something different. So you're retiring from Urban World Film Festival after 18 years. Leading that amazing film. And for those who might not be familiar with Urban World Film Festival, it is an Oscar qualifying festival. So for people like myself, storytellers and filmmakers, you want to make sure you get your work in an Oscar qualifying film festival, because that leads to other opportunities, especially when it comes to award season, which we are in right now. And we will be leading up to the major awards that will kick off at the beginning of January, moving us into February. You're the creative producer. You have a production company called Glorified, and you are also the executive director of Leading Women Defined Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
You. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, this is going to be great. This is so excited. So outside of, and we're gonna get into your mom in a little bit and that legacy, and that's what brings really most of us here this evening is our love for her and the influence that she had on all of our lives, on the lives of our family members, my mother in particular. I mean, just just the energy anytime she would be in your mother's presence, which was so magnified for all of us. But I want to take a minute before we go there, and I want to talk a little bit about your film work and your work as an executive producer, in particular around a film that you did called Sylvie's Love. And, how did you even get into filmmaking, working in production? And was that always the plan for you? Or did that you kind of come into that through other means?
It just kind of organically evolved. So I was concentrated in marketing while I was in college.
Okay.
And ultimately found my way to HBO when I graduated. So my first job out of college was at HBO in a marketing role where I got to really kind of test out different aspects of marketing, and then landed in promotions and spent a few years at HBO. So I started in the entertainment industry with proximity to production. Didn't even know really what that meant or if I wanted to do it. But just kind of as I navigated my career, I left HBO, I went to Warner Music Group. Music is another love of mine. And, it just, again, it's such an integral part of the filmmaking process. So again, had some experience there, went to Time Warner Corporate, and then ultimately started my own company after spending about 12 years in corporate America. And one of my first clients was Urban World. Someone had approached me and said, we're looking for an executive producer. And so that's how I got involved in the beginning. And my role evolved into festival director and head of programming. So the closer and closer I got to just the process of filmmaking and the content creators, I caught the bug. It definitely was just something that spoke to me, that I got excited about. And I just started dipping my toe in the water in terms of what it meant to be involved in independent film. And first, as an executive producer, as a film financier, around a couple of projects many, many years ago. And then when I left Time Warner, I started a consulting company that focused on everything from curating content to marketing to branding. It was really kind of a mix of things that just were interesting to me. And BET was one of my clients. And one of the things that I used to do with BET Networks was actually help them strategize around how they show up at film festivals. Because it's an opportunity to actually market your content if you're a BET or an HBO or one of the media and entertainment companies, but it's also an opportunity to connect with content creators. And, it's an opportunity to help from just a mission standpoint, put storytelling to the forefront that typically hasn't been in the foreground. And really kind of lean into content creators of color on a global basis. So all of those things kind of just, again, put me in proximity to content creation and just kind of kept reinforcing that this is something that I was interested in doing. And when I was at a film festival in Atlanta called the Bronze Lens Film Festival, I was at a producer's luncheon on behalf of BET. Was something that they were hosting. And I happened to be sitting next to Eugene Ash, who at the time had a film that was his first feature in the Bronze Lens Film Festival. And that is who went on to write and direct Sylvie's Love. So it was just very happenstance that I met him. We struck up a conversation. He was a New Yorker as well. He was familiar with Urban World. And, ultimately, a couple months later, he sent me his script and said, I'd love for you to read this and let me know what you think. And if you like it, I'd love for you to help me make this. Because part of our discussion was just, wanting to get more into the idea of creative producing and really starting to pursue that more diligently.
That's amazing. And I want to get side note for those where did you go to undergrad? You said after undergrad, where did you go to undergrad?
I went to UPenn. I went to Wharton undergrad.
Okay. Was there because you're from St. Louis?
I am.
Okay. Was there a distinct like move to say that I do not want to go to WashU. I feel like my son is never going to want to go to GW, which, by the way, I want to be very clear. He's going to go to Morehouse for undergrad. So he ain't trying to come to GW, right? Like we already have that instilled.
Right.
But I'm curious, right? Like with your mom's like legacy, was like, were you intentionally like, I don't necessarily want to be here? Like, did you feel like you needed to go away to really kind of find some of your own identity and creativity?
Yeah, I mean, it was never a thought for me that I was going to WashU. And I honestly don't think it was ever a thought for my mother, because I think, you know, at the end of the day, I'm sure my parents would have loved me to get a great education for free at WashU and just, you know, enjoy that. But no one ever pressured me to do that. I didn't even apply to WashU. You know, so it was always my intention, and I had been exposed just through travel and just through, you know, opportunities afforded by my parents, that I knew that there was another chapter outside of St. Louis, and that college was the first of those chapters.
That's amazing. I really love that you said there wasn't that expectation. So you were like, I mean, because your mother always gave so much of us like the ability to feel like we were free, right? And then we could go and do everything. So that's amazing to also know that that's clearly what she was also instilling in her own household, right?
Yes, she definitely pushed me to be fiercely independent. And I spent a lot of time at WashU. Like my mom, over those 32 years, I remember, you know, each of her different office spaces and just kind of what that progression looked like, because I was showing up there after school. So, you know, I would be dropped off in my younger years and would, you know, get into whatever mischief I could find while she was finishing up work. So, you know, and then as I got older and it was, you know, walk-in lay down theater and 13th Carnival, like all that stuff is just emblazoned in my mind in terms of my WashU experience. So and just the student population that spent time in our home. You know, my mom was so welcoming to so many students. And, you know, wanted to give them that reprieve from the dorm and the cafeteria and campus, and to come just, you know, a block over and spend some time outside of that.
That's so real. And as you talk about like your storytelling and your work, and I'm kind of monitoring and looking at the chat, and people are like, yeah, I see Maurice Wallace was like, he was one of those people that was at the house, that was hanging out and learning. And that's, I mean, that family nature is, I'm sure, so critical to the work that you also, you do as a storyteller. I know, like, what are the challenges that I've faced as whether it be a content creator or a critic, right? I straddle the line a little bit. What are some of the challenges that you have entered and encountered in the entertainment industry trying to get Black stories produced, or particularly stories that are, you know, historically marginalized within a traditional Hollywood film like framework?
You know, I think Sylvie's Love is probably the best example for me to talk about, because that was a 7-year journey. And, you know,
most people don't know that. They think it happens like overnight because they see the final product, but they don't realize all the backstory that goes into this.
The backstory filled with many no's, lots and lots of no's. And, you know, we were trying to put something forward that was very different than we typically see in terms of, you know, films that portray Black life, and trying to do something that was really centered around Black love and characters who had agency, characters who had aspiration, and not trying to dismiss what was happening, since this was a period piece, late 50s, early 60s, but just not having it be in the foreground. And so as we kind of went through the process, you know, the first no's were just kind of from the studio saying, we like the script, haven't seen it before, but no, we're not going to finance it, or we're not going to co-finance it. Go make it independently and then come back to us.
With your finished product. And for most people who might not, for most of us on the call right now, like, you might not know how much it costs. Give people a random ballpark figure, because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions on like even how much it costs to make what they say like an indie film.
I mean, you can make an indie film for $1 million. You can make one for $3 to $5 million. You can make one for $10 to $15 million. When you get to 20, those are smaller, more intimate films, but studios, smaller studios, streamers, are making those movies, much more frequently now. So
$20 million, like you said, $20 million. I don't think people realize the hurdles that Black producers in particular, like yourself, have to go through to get the stories told that we all love and cherish.
You're exactly right. And, one thing I want to say about that process, about the financing, the other piece of it, as we talked to independent financiers, smaller production companies, they wanted to minimize the budget. They wanted to say, okay, you don't need that much money. You can do it for half. So it's kind of like putting us into a box, because ultimately what they're saying is that we're not sure that you're going to make that money back. So we want to minimize our risk by just diminishing what your budget is, which, impacts what you can, do on screen and ultimately what your end product looks like. So we had, no to the budget that, we were putting forth. We had, in Hollywood's eyes, a first-time director in Eugene, and that he'd done a very small independent feature, but nothing in the studio system. So it was kind of like, we really like the script, but no, he won't direct it. We need to attach someone else. And then the other thing is we wanted to to make this film on film. It's a period piece. We wanted it to look like the period. Film,
and that costs nowadays. That's not video, right?
It does not happen very often. Absolutely. As you know, as a filmmaker. And so just the pressing for that was just another, yep, we hear what you're saying, but no, that'll never happen. And so, we got really lucky that what we were trying to do with our characters was not have the same people that we typically see in romantic comedies, Black romantic comedies, on screen as our couples. So we weren't trying to have Morris Chestnut and Gabrielle Union or Megan Good, or just people that are so often, great, talented actors, but we just see them over and over again. And so we were really looking for, fresh faces. And one of those fresh faces for us was Nnamdi Asomugha, who took on the role as Robert. And we approached him through our attorney to, just read the script. And usually you send someone a script, and if you hear back in a couple of weeks, you're lucky, because people have a lot that they're reading and a lot that they're doing and preparing for. Yeah. And the next morning, like within probably 12 to 18 hours, I got a call back from my friend / attorney, and he was like, Nnamdi read the script. He loves it. He wants to get on the phone with you and Eugene. So
12 hours.
Yeah. Like he got it.
That doesn't happen.
Saturday night, and Sunday morning, I got a text saying Nnamdi wants to get on the phone with you guys. He's read the script. Now we got lucky because Nnamdi was getting on a plane and just had the time to read it. So he's like, let me read it. And so we get on the phone with him, and he essentially, slightly interviewed us about really wanting to understand, is this really the film that you want to make sure that we were creatively aligned? And so, once he started probing and asking those questions, we certainly knew that he was a producer, and that this certainly was going to be his, largest role to date. I had seen him at Sundance a couple of years before, which is how he came to mind as just a fresh face, someone who's talented, someone who, fits that kind of Sidney Poitier, like just was going to take you back to Paris Blues with Sidney Poitier and Diane Carroll, but just kind of flipping that with a slightly different story. So Nnamdi understood what we were trying to do, believed in it, and knew that if he didn't get involved, the film probably would not have been made the way it was made. where we didn't have to compromise. And it was a really big risk for him and his production company to finance this film. There were a few people that came in with finishing funds, but for the most part, he stepped up and took a chance to not only act in what was his biggest role to date, but also to be producing. So he was wearing two hats on set. And I just have, so much love and respect and gratitude for the role that he's played in this process.
It's a really beautiful, and this is part of what I love about production as a purposeful storytelling device, is that you have a vision, your director and your writer, like they have visions, and then you have this beautiful, harmonious moment where people come together and it's like, okay, I want to do this, you want to do this, I'm taking a chance on you, you're taking a chance on me. For those who might not know, Namdi, he was a professional football player. So, completely switching, industries, everything, everyone's like, oh, everybody wants to be an actor, but, he's someone also, married to a phenomenal actress, now stepping out of his, athlete role into, an acting role, and then did a really phenomenal job. And then you particularly paired him with a stellar actress in her own right. Tessa Thompson is one of my favorites. I absolutely love her. I literally just watched Creed 2 like the other day, just for the sake of, watching really Michael B. Jordan, but I do love Tessa. I want to be very clear about that. But it was phenomenal, right? And I love the collaboration that comes with, you said, taking a chance. When you look at you, in a recent conversation, you mentioned the idea of Black love being urgent. Can you speak a little bit more about the importance of stories like Sylvie's Love, that really center on Black people, Black couples, Black love, who have their challenges, their relationship challenges, that we just don't really get an opportunity to see that organic, relationship unfold?
Yeah. So one of the things that I remember Eugene saying to me, and then also in his conversation when he was meeting Tessa for the first time, he had an iPad with him, and he actually pulled up this Gordon Parks photo, which I think is called The Department Store. And if you saw it, many people who are watching probably have seen it somewhere in his retrospective of work. But it is of a mother and daughter. They're dressed very nicely, and they're standing outside of a department store, and they're below a sign that says colored entrance. And in Eugene's mind, his vision was, I want to zoom in so that you can't see that sign and you just see this mother and this daughter. That's the story that I want to tell. And so again, it was immediately taking, not taking race out of the equation and civil rights out of the equation, but that just wasn't going to be the focus and energy around every scene in the film. And so part of our process in trying to, whether it was getting talent attached, looking for financing, even the Black people that we spoke to, who, was surprising in some cases, they wanted to see more civil rights. They're like, it's not urgent enough for me. And, that was code for, you're in the late 50s, early 60s. Why aren't we seeing more of what's happening in Washington? With the March on Washington. And we get a little bit of that in Mona's character where, she goes to the March on Washington, but that's not defining her. It's not defining her character. It's not defining the plot points in the story. And so, it would boggle our minds, and we're like, the love is what's urgent. And I feel like when we came out of 2020, I think December 23rd was our release date. So we were right around Christmas, end of the year. And, all of us, our community and just the world at large had been, just struggling with the pandemic, struggling with racial and social injustice, and just really felt that the urgency of the love and the humanity that was seen in our film was so important at that time. And so we've always wanted to lead with the humanity versus leaning into the adversity, which so many of our films have adversity. And I think just to your original question about relationships and love, and they're complex. I mean, Sylvie was in a complex situation. Things were not perfect. Things just didn't unfold without any issues. Robert was having, challenges as a struggling / emerging / very talented jazz artist. So I just think all of that imperfection, all of the complex layers to life and those characters was just really important for us to lean into that and just what it's like to be a human being. And the other thing that, we always talked about is just, we wanted this film to remind you of when you go to your grandparents or your parents and you're just looking through the photo albums and you're seeing the joy and the love and the happiness and those moments that we all know existed, no matter what your circumstance and class might have been, there were opportunities to find that. And we didn't see ourselves look like that on screen. Other communities outside of the Black community certainly was not seeing that. So it was really, an opportunity for us to write a love letter to the Black community, but that we wanted everyone to read that letter and to experience that film and to experience Black people who love each other, who are human, and who have agency. And you feel that because the women's movement was also happening during that time. And so Sylvie, even as an aspiring television producer at that time, like we just hadn't seen that character.
No.
So that is, that was something that was just really intentional about the script that Eugene wrote, and then just bringing all of the lushness and the beauty with costume design and hair and makeup and production design, and making those characters, that period, and the lives that they were living look as stunning as possible.
Well, you succeeded. It was so well done. And I think, Gabrielle, you mentioned the timing and, being released almost exactly a year ago, December, as you mentioned, right before Christmas of 2020. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. We're in the middle of yet another, right? And I do mean yet another racial injustice awakening, right? Because I feel like for Black people, we're like, yo, we've been woke. Like the rest of y'all come catch up, right? We've been awoke to all of these challenges and these issues and these injustices. But it was such a beautiful pause. And it was so well done. I don't want to lose the point of your creative decision to shoot on film and why it felt like all of those nostalgic feelings came through in the use of shooting on film. Like it felt very 1950s. It felt very, very comfortable, very homey. And you're right. Sometimes, and I really appreciate, I know our audience, whether they're here on our webinar or they're watching on one of our streaming platforms, we needed the break. And I feel like your film really provided us with a safe place of refuge where yes, there's going to be challenges in relationships, but we just want to see Black love, and to be able to see Black love and to fall into that as just it was like a warm blanket, right? And Michelle's like, yes, like it was a comforting, it was winter. We're all exhausted. Like I said, we're we didn't know, obviously, it's not halfway through the pandemic, right? But we're in the middle of this global pandemic, all this uncertainty. And it was such a comforting place to have a beautiful release, right? It was like, let's just sit here in this gorgeous film and these amazing characters and this beautiful story as their love unfolds. So I want to honestly thank you for that because it's so powerful. We have a number of Gabrielle, we have a number of students who have registered for this event today. and who are watching, and we have alumni as well who might be interested in considering careers in the film, television, storytelling, as I like to also kind of open it up, media industry, specifically production. Do you have any like insight or advice with your legacy in the industry right now, as you kind of turn around and look back, or even also looking forward? Any insight or wisdom that you would share with someone who's interested in going into film production right now?
I mean, I would say it's a great time to do that, because I feel like, and I'm curious as to what your perspectives are as well, just given the work that you do and being a content creator as well,
Yeah.
is, I do feel like there is a shift, and I am I'm hopeful that has some permanence to it. I feel like it does. I feel like with success of, everything from Black Panther to looking at the advent of streaming and what we've seen, and just kind of the future of distribution, that there's just so much opportunity for content creators in general and of color, for our stories to be told much more readily. I do think there's still a lot of opportunity for the executive ranks within some of these companies to just continue on the trajectory that they are on in the last 18 months, or the last 18 months since George Floyd really began to turn the tide in the industry. But I think for people that are interested, just for me, it was really the proximity and being very intentional about the types of projects that I worked on. I was in entertainment, but even within entertainment, just trying to be very intentional about the people that I worked with, the types of projects, and trying to connect the dots wherever I could. So if I was producing an event for a client, so for example, one of the, I've been consulting with HBO since I left Time Warner and kind of left the corporate track. So for about 20 years, I've been, whether it's HBO or Warner Media, as they've evolved as a company. And one of the events that I produced for about 10 years for some executives at HBO was called the BFF Summit, which BFF used to stand for Black Filmmaker Foundation. It was founded by Warrington Hudlin, Reggie Hudlin's brother. And it was an opportunity to bring together about 100 to 150 senior level executives of color. So basically, if you've ever heard of like the Herb Allen Summit out in Idaho, where all the deals get made and, the Bill Gates of the world go, this was, a version of that for people of color to come together and have a community to, continue to educate and inspire one another in terms of just the content and the speakers, and just, kind of very high level individuals that were coming for a 2.5-day conference. So that was something that I produced for HBO, and I helped them program it for 10 years. And just the people that I met in that room over those 10 years of just being able to email or call, or there's, just relationships that have been nurtured. So relationships are obviously really important. I think agencies are also talent agencies are a great just training ground. You look at someone like Charles King, who's the founder of Macro, which some of you may be familiar with. They produce Fences, they produced Harriet, they produced Judas and the Black Messiah most recently, in terms of, what was in the award season cycle last year. But Charles started in the mailroom at William Morris Endeavor, or William Morris at the time, and rose to the ranks of partner. And so it's definitely an arena that gives you a really good sense of just the industry overall, in terms of being anchored by talent representation. So proximity and relationships, and I didn't go to film school. I actually thought about it for a minute, but just decided to chart my path through real world experiences. But every now and then I think about, should I go back to film school? But it may be too late for that. We'll see.
Well, I mean, as the resident the higher education administrator in this conversation, I will say that it is never too late. It is never too late to go back. But at the same time, I would also question, as you just said, like, do you necessarily need to?
Right.
You have, 20 plus years of experience in the industry, that there's no program in the world that is going to give you what you've been able to amass. And I hope for those who are interested in production, they were like taking some notes, listing some of those conferences and festivals and things that you were mentioning, because it is so critical. When I think of, I'm sure many people on this webinar and streaming with us and watching, I'm a huge fan of Insecure. And I'm a huge fan of Issa Rae. So when you mention HBO and the work that they've been doing, highlighting historically marginalized voices for decades, right? I'm not talking about, a couple of years ago, but I mean, like, for a while. It's really refreshing, as you mentioned, to hear about, these intentional inclusive events. Like, we're going to bring, like you said, 100 plus Black content creators and executives to come together to find ways to highlight their stories. And that's what I really appreciate about HBO as a leader in the industry. I have two more questions to ask you, and then I'm going to circle back and bring us back home to Washu and talk a little bit more about your mom, if you don't mind, and bring that back in. But I would love to know, just saying in production in particular, so as an EP, or for those, executive producer, like, how do you decide which projects that you want to take on? What is it that, if there was someone who was listening or watching this later and they were like, actually, I have a really great, idea. What are some of the elements of stories and storytelling that really, speak out to you? Say Eugene had the script and you were like, oh, wait a minute, we need to stay in touch. What is it that, whether it be Sylvie's Loves or other projects, that really stand out as an executive producer?
For me, it's things that we haven't seen before. So just kind of like seeing the unseen is kind of like my personal mantra in terms of the work that I'm trying to do as a creative producer. And it's whether it's a story we haven't seen, characters we haven't seen, the way we're telling the story, the approach, we haven't seen it that way. Like, I always, whether it's in film or outside of just film, kind of how I walk through life, it's really trying to be unconventional, trying to be unexpected. Just, the mischief of life is way more interesting to me than feeling like we want to do something that we've seen before. So that is what's, I think, most intriguing, just at the core and soul of it. And then, it's the visionary behind it. So if it's the writer, if it's another collaborative producer, it's the opportunity to collaborate. And who is that person or who is that team is super, super important to me. Because it is, like I said, 7 years is a long time. Eugene is, like a family member at this point, just based on the amount of time. And even just the team that you're with in terms of your crew on set during production, it is, it's intense. And so, I want to have fun. I want to be fulfilled. And are the projects going to give me that? That is a question that I ask myself. And I'm just really intentional about, those types of projects, that being at the core of it, because the range of projects that I'm working on is, everything from film, TV, scripted, unscripted, animated. They're all very, very different, but they all excite me equally. So it's, yeah.
I love it. So there isn't a particular medium. And when I always think of TV, I think of the opportunity to be, it's more concise, whether it's I have to remind people, as I was talking about Insecure, everyone's like, I wish Insecure was like 60 minutes. And it's like, well, it's a 30-minute sitcom, right? So you get 26 minutes. That's just what you get. You're not getting, 55 minutes, you get 26, but there's something to be said. So do you have a preference of a short or long form? You get your long form film, but in your short form TV?
No preference. Yeah, no
Nice.
preference. And like a TV show like Insecure, which I also really appreciate, you know, I'll go back because it is so short and I'll just watch it again. And I watch
Guilty.
things over because you miss things.
Yep.
There's
dialogue. I'm always like the dialogue. I'm like, oh, did
Yeah.
I miss something? Was there something there? Was there a joke that I missed?
Yeah. What did Kelly say on Insecure? Like, you know,
Every
she's
time.
the best. So, and she just directed the last episode.
I
don't
know
if you knew that.
Natasha Rothwell. I did. I
Yeah.
saw that on Sunday and I was so excited because it was, I loved the episode, but I was like, yes,
Yeah.
I love seeing, and she directed one of my favorite episodes of the previous season, which I love that we're seeing more people of color in these major creative roles. Yes, the acting, but in particular behind the scenes, like yourself, is so critical. Issa did that, you're doing that. It's just, yeah.
I was going to say, if you look at Natasha, if you look at Insecure from season to season, you can see in the credits her progression from script supervisor, you know, all the way to, you know, directing now. So like you said, that the whole multi-hyphenate opportunity, we should be doing more of that, because I feel like, you know, creativity is a big part of what inspires me. And people are creative in so many different ways, and creativity means so many things, to me at least. And that's something actually just that my mother taught me from a very early age, of kind of what creativity and art and culture is. And so it's something that I've definitely carried forward as a content creator.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And everyone, because I want to be mindful of our time because it's so phenomenal, but what a lot of us really want to hear about, Gabrielle, because it is so meaningful, right? I'm gonna take the last, you know, portion of our time this evening to talk about your mom, if you don't mind. And, you know, Glore had such a profound impact on so many students, faculty, staff, alumni, our parents, right? It wasn't even just students. And that's, for me in particular, of the Washu community, right? And she was all of these amazing, phenomenal things to all of us. But to you, she was, you know, she was your mom. And when you reflect on your relationship with your mother, what are some of the most impactful things that you received? And for those who are watching and listening, I would love for you also, as Gabrielle responds to this question, for you to also go ahead and throw in some of your favorite Dean Glore moments or little nuggets of wisdom. We'd love to see some of those too. So please.
Wow, where do I begin? I mean,
I know that was a heavy question. I'm sorry.
No, not heavy. There's just a lot to say about it. You know, I think, as I mentioned earlier, my mother and my father pushed me to be fiercely independent. And definitely on a day-to-day basis, I can just remember things that my mother did that just was constantly pushing me to not rely on her, but to really kind of do my own thing. And the other thing that she exposed me to was just so many different experiences. And I think it just kind of speaks to the exposure that I had, and goes back to your question about, you know, leaving St. Louis to go to college. You know, I think exposure plays into, at least for me, that decision making, and having a sense of what else is out there beyond, you know, kind of your first 18 years. But just even from just being a young child, she encouraged me to try so many different things. So whether I was in cooking class or sailing lessons or ballet, piano, basketball, which is ultimately where I landed in terms of what I got most excited about. And, you know, my dad played, you know, a big role in that, as well, in terms of my love of basketball developing. But just to want to be exposed to as many different things as possible, and then kind of land on what you are most interested in. And that doesn't have to just be one thing. And then to just really dig deep and push and really focus on how you can be the best that you can be in whatever those areas of interest are. The other big lesson from my mom for me was to be comfortable not doing what everyone else is doing. So to take the path that is least traveled. I forget that exact Robert Frost quote, but when I was graduating high school, and like in your yearbook, you had to have your photo and some kind of quote, and mine had
it had to be profound.
Yeah, I mean, mine was just like, take the path less traveled. And it's something that my mother instilled. And it's not that you're just taking that path, but it's being comfortable taking that path, no matter what, no matter if it's more challenging. But even to the basics of like, my mother would not let me get my ears pierced. She's like, why? She's like, everyone gets their ears pierced. Like,
why are we doing this? Yeah.
Yeah. Why? You don't have to do it just because everyone else is doing it. And at the end of the day, I don't think she really cared whether I had my ears pierced or not. I think it was just a moment that she chose to say, here's an example of something that you don't have to do it. So I was probably like almost 30 years old by the time I got my ears pierced.
Oh my gosh.
But
I appreciate that though. I like you said that, because it's the simple things that you mentioned, that she was like, it's not everybody does blank,
right?
But you don't have to,
right?
And you can choose if you want to do that, but you don't have to. And we're not going to do it just because everybody does it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I vibe with that a lot. As we're trying to be, I mean, as you know, her role as dean of students and our associate dean of students, I mean, it is the nurturing that she provide. I mean, she was a mother to a few, but also she was a mother to all. And I can only imagine sort of what that was like, kind of having to share her with so many people. Was that difficult for you? Because I mean, she felt like, as much as she was doing things for everybody, it felt so personal, right? Like she knew you and your story and your triumphs, your child. Like she knew, I mean, she would see me and like hone in on like, Imani, how are you doing? How is like, Howard, how is this? And that sort of just very direct outside. I'm like, Glore, how do you remember you have thousands of students? And she can tell you exactly what you did. And that sort of laser focus, was that ever challenging for you?
It wasn't for me. And I guess, you know, it's because I had enough love at home, and, you know, we spent a lot of time together. One of the things that we used to do, I remember I was 12 years old when I saw my first foreign film. And that's because, you know, we would go to the High Point Theater all the time. So my love of film started very early. And, you know, she would drop me off at the Esquire Theater, which I don't even know if it's still called the Esquire on Clayton Road.
Is it? I think so. I think it is,
she
right?
Would drop me off for the day. It was almost like it was her babysitter. I swear, like I would see like 3 movies and she'd like come back and pick me up.
That's an 8-hour day. And now she can come back and get you.
On a Saturday. She did what she needed to do.
That's awesome.
Was seeing Rocky for like, you know, you mentioned Creed. I was seeing Rocky for the 10th time. So
that's awesome.
You know, we spent a lot of time together, but I think also because at a certain point, when she really started forging these relationships with students where I was aware of it, I think she was doing it because it's just innately who she was from her early days at the university. But I think by the time I really was paying attention to, okay, there's like a group of people that are over here again. I was a teenager at that point. And so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go do my thing. She's entertaining. So it was, you know, again, that independence and just, you know, feeling like I can have my life over here. And then, you know, there were periods when they intersected. And I was, you know, very much a part of however she was or whoever she was entertaining. But I definitely realized quickly that I was not the only child that I thought I was, in terms of just, you know, I remember there's one story, Michael Carter. I'm sure Michelle knows Michael Carter, but Michael Carter was at our house all the time. And like, I remember my mom laughing about how she came home one time and I don't think I was home, but she tells a story about how he was like in the driveway washing his car, like radio on, like literally like this was his house. So it's just a testament to how comfortable certain students got, which isn't it's funny. It's not a bad thing, but it's again, I think just her warm embrace and welcome and energy. And just like you said, there's nothing, kind of cursory. It was deep.
Mhm.
Like she knew what was happening with you. She knew what was happening with your family. If she'd met your parents, siblings, like whatever it was, she was paying attention.
She was paying attention, and like you said, even with the way, I feel like the way in which you select stories to highlight as an executive producer are also very similar to the way your mother could literally mother like hundreds and like thousands of students.
Mhm.
Um, we didn't feel like we were one of the bunch. We felt like, as I mentioned, that she saw us and she remembered. She would ask about, like, how your mama doing, how your siblings doing, like things like how are so and so, and you're like, how does she remember that when there's all of these people, and to be so invested in
Mhm.
our success. And that for me is what always, she was invested in my 19-year-old dreams, even when I was still forming them, right? I was still
Mhm.
forming said dreams. And she was like, you can do that. And I was like, but she's like, no, like you can do that. And the confidence that she poured into so many of us, on behalf of all of us, if it hasn't been said recently, I know it's been said, but if it hasn't been said recently, thank you. Thank you for letting us share in the love, the abundance of love that your mother had to offer. It's been the lives that she touched, whether you get a moment to read some of the chat, or it's been said before, but the lives that she touched and the way in which she just inspired generations is not lost on any of us. I mean, it's partially why she was an ideal selection for this inaugural conversation series, and a celebration, because of the amazing influence that she's had on all of our lives. So thank you.
Oh, well, I just appreciate hearing all of the love that so many people had for her. And I remember at her memorial service, there was a slideshow that we put together, and there was one photo towards the end that was zoomed in on her, and then it kind of pulled back as it opened up, and it opened up with like 100 kids surrounding her from the university, right, at some program. And she's sitting in the middle like the queen, and it's like everyone is around her. And it's such a great photo because, just the way that it was constructed in this slideshow, it just showed that she's one person that had impact on so many. And she loved what she did. I mean, to be there 32 years, there's a profound endurance to have that kind of longevity in one place, but it gratified her so much.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I know the picture you're referring to, and I call it the queen in her court. That's the way I looked at it, because I thought that's pretty accurate for what it was. But Gabrielle, mindful of our time this evening and our guests who are here, I want to bring it out just a little bit and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
But a current role you do, also, if you can just share a little bit, as we wrap up, as your role as a consulting producer with Warner Media. So you're transitioning, you're retiring from the amazing work that you did as executive producer of the Urban World Film Festival, which is amazing. And you're doing executive director work with Leading Women Defined Foundation. But can you just share a little bit about your consulting producer role with Warner Media? And then also, if there's anything that we should be on the lookout for as an audience that we can see coming up from you, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So Warner Media, they have a division called 150. And And I've been consulting with them for the last couple of years. It's a division that's been around for about 7 years. And I actually was on the team that was helping to launch this new initiative. And the name of the initiative comes from the actual 4 Warner Brothers that started the company, and they needed like $150 to buy some piece for their projector that was going to enable them to start Warner Brothers, the company. And so they had to like consign a family horse and to get the $150. And so the idea is that small investments can really blossom into big opportunities as we look at Warner Brothers studios today. And so what we do is actually invest in content creators that have projects that we feel really lean into the whole idea of content innovation and kind of the whole unexpected, unconventional. The things that I talked about are things that I just kind of use as I navigate life, which is why it made such great sense for me to align with this particular division. It allows me to actually pick projects, develop them. So I'm really using it as an opportunity to hone some of my skills so that when I go and do my own independent creative producing work, kind of on a year-round basis, I'm constantly helping other content creators. So it's kind of like the next iteration of the film festival, where we're providing a platform at Urban World for people to showcase, and you're trying to be nurturing to those filmmakers. We're just at a different stage in these projects development. And so we fund them to help get a package together that hopefully we can then take to an HBO or a Warner Brothers or an HBO Max, which is their streaming service, and, just serve it up and see if they will develop it further. So it's just another area that allows me to kind of connect the dots in terms of being able to pay the bills while, I'm spending, years on developing new projects, and hopefully 7 years is not the magic number for some of the new things that I'm in the process of trying to push forward. So the Warner Media of it's fun, and it is kind of full circle in that I started my career at HBO, and I've been able to kind of maintain that connection to the company over my 30 years in New York City.
Wow. Well, Gabrielle, again, it is such an honor to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It has truly been a pleasure. I will just say, on behalf of the Washington University Black Alumni Council and the John B. Irvin Scholars Program, thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us this evening, sharing your journey, and as I mentioned, sharing great memories of your mom with all of us. It's been lovely. I hope everyone, thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Please keep an eye out for future events and the Salute to Black Faculty and Staff series. It has been truly an honor and a privilege to be able to kick off this inaugural event. If you'd like to be featured or have a suggestion for a faculty or staff spotlight, please use the survey that my colleague Liz has placed it in the chat. And if you did not have the privilege of knowing Dean Adrienne Glore, please visit the link in the chat to learn more about her absolutely incredible contributions to our WashU community. She is truly a legend. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe and be blessed. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thanks.